There was a man. Every Sunday morning, at precisely 8:27 a.m., he would walk through the heavy oak doors of St. Anthony's Church. Not a minute earlier, not a minute late. 8:27 every time. Folks joked that if the clocks ever stopped working, they'd just wait for Harold to show up. He moved slowly, not because of weakness, but because of a kind of peace. Like someone who had seen enough mornings to know the difference between rushing and arriving. His coat was always the same, a faded gray-blue wool, worn but clean, his pants pressed, shoes polished just enough. He dressed like someone who had once cared deeply about appearances, and maybe still did, in small, quiet ways. He never sat anywhere else, always the last pew, right side, third seat in. That was Harold's spot. And the seat next to him? Always empty. Not because no one liked him, not because he asked for space, but because something about that seat felt taken. Like someone else was supposed to be there, and everyone just knew better than to sit there. One Sunday, a visiting couple unknowingly sat next to Harold. The wife smiled kindly. Harold didn't flinch, didn't frown, didn't make a scene. He simply stood up and walked out. Quiet, calm. And he didn't come back that day. After that, no one ever tried again. St. Anthony's wasn't a big church. Maybe 50 pews, old stone walls, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows that painted little rainbows on the floor. Most folks in town had seen Harold there for decades. He didn't speak much, but he was part of the place, like the cracked baptismal font, or the hymn books with pages folded at favorite songs. He belonged. Kids were told, "That's Mr. Harold. He's been sitting there longer than you've been alive." They'd nod, wide-eyed, and go back to their coloring books and snack bags. No one knew where he went after church, or who he saw, or if he had anyone waiting for him. All they knew was, every Sunday, 8:27, Harold would arrive, sit, bow his head, and stay until the final note of the last hymn. He never joined coffee hour, never lingered in the hall to talk about sermons or politics or weather, but his presence spoke louder than most conversations. There's something about quiet people. If you pay attention, they often carry the heaviest stories. The turning point came on an overcast Sunday in early November. A little boy named Liam, 10 years old, sat 2 rows ahead with his grandmother. He was fidgety that day, more than usual, tapping his shoes, twisting his fingers, eyes darting backward toward the last pew. After communion, when most folks were still kneeling or whispering prayers, Liam got up, walked right back to Harold, stood next to him, and asked softly but clearly, "Why do you always sit alone?" For a long second, no one breathed. Harold turned, slowly, looked at the boy. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled. Not wide, not forced, just soft, real. "Because," he said, his voice low and steady, "I'm not really alone." Liam blinked. "But no one's ever with you." Harold looked at the seat beside him, tapped it gently. "She used to sit right there, every Sunday, for 42 years. The boy sat down. No one stopped him, not even his grandmother, who was watching with half panic, half pride. Harold didn't speak much after that, but he didn't need to. Liam stayed there until the final hymn ended. The organ played softly, people began to leave. But that day, something shifted. The silence around Harold no longer felt heavy. It felt sacred. Over the next weeks, Liam would sometimes return to the last pew. Sometimes just for a minute. Sometimes he'd sit with Harold for half the service. They didn't talk much, but somehow that was enough. Eventually, Harold told him more. Not in a rush, in bits and pieces, like old photographs taken out of the box and shared one by one. He spoke of Ellen, his wife. She had red hair and freckles and a laugh that filled a room. She was late to everything, loved sweet tea too much, and cried during commercials. They met in 1959 at a church picnic. He offered her the last piece of peach pie. She refused. He insisted. She rolled her eyes, and that, he said, was the exact moment he fell in love. They married a year later, and for 40 decades they sat together in the same pew, always third seat in, right side, last row. Even after she got sick, she came, until she couldn't. The last Sunday she came to church, he helped her up the steps. She was frail, thin, her scarf tied tightly around her head. As the choir sang "It Is Well With My Soul," she gripped his hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll keep sitting here, just like always." And he promised. After she passed, he came alone, every Sunday. Same seat, same time, same promise. Not out of grief, not because he didn't know how to move on, but because when you love someone that long and that deeply, some part of them never really leaves. And Harold, he wasn't waiting to see her again. He already did. In the light through the window, in the quiet between hymns, in the empty seat that was never really empty. Years passed. Liam grew. Harold aged. But every Sunday, without fail, the last pew remained the same. Until one morning, Harold wasn't there. People noticed. Some whispered. Some shrugged. One or two teared up quietly. And then Liam, now 15, walked to the last pew and sat down. Alone. Except, not really. Because when he closed his eyes, he could almost hear a soft voice beside him say, "Don't worry, kid, you're not alone." And somehow, that felt true. From that day on, the last pew was never empty. Sometimes it was Liam. Sometimes an old woman who missed her husband. Sometimes a man in a suit with tired eyes. Sometimes no one sat there, but someone always looked at it with a kind of reverence, because stories, like people, leave echoes, and promises have a way of sitting down beside you long after they're gone.
Liam wasn't the kind of boy who liked church. He didn't hate it exactly, but he didn't love it either. The pews were hard, the air smelled like candles and old hymnals, and the sermons, well, they always felt like they were meant for someone older. Someone who had mortgages, regrets, or back pain. But Liam, he was 10. He liked peanut butter, mystery novels, and skateboards with flames on them. Yet somehow, ever since the day he sat beside Mr. Harold, something had changed. He no longer fidgeted through the service. He stopped asking how much longer till it was over. Instead, he found himself looking back just to see if the old man was there. And he always was. Same coat, same seat, same stillness. But now, there was something different. Liam knew his name, and Harold knew his. that mattered. The second time Liam approached Harold, it was raining. One of those gray, soft rains that makes the world feel slower. His grandmother had forgotten her umbrella, so they stood under the stone awning at the church exit, waiting for the rain to lighten. Liam looked down the steps and spotted Harold standing alone under a big black umbrella, the kind with a wooden handle and faded fabric. He wasn't in a hurry, just standing, watching the rain. Without saying a word, Liam stepped away from his grandmother and walked toward him. Harold saw him coming, tilted the umbrella slightly, and without speaking, made room under the canopy. Liam stood beside him, close, but not too close, just enough. They listened to the rain together for a while, and then Liam asked, "Did you ever think about sitting somewhere else?" Harold chuckled, a soft, almost forgotten sound. "Nah," he said, "not once. Even when people stared at you? I don't notice stares much, not anymore." Liam nodded slowly, as if that made sense. It didn't, but it sounded true. That day began something that neither of them would have called friendship, not at first. It was quieter than that, gentler, like two old trees growing side by side, not talking, just being. Every Sunday after that, Liam would glance back during the service. If Harold was there, he'd smile, just a little. And sometimes after the final hymn, he'd walk back and sit for a moment beside him. They never stayed long, never said much, but somehow those moments meant more than 100 coffee-hour conversations. A month or so passed, and one Sunday, Liam arrived early. Too early. The church was mostly empty, few people setting up, the organist warming up, playing half melodies. Harold wasn't there yet. So Liam did something he hadn't done before. He walked all the way back and sat down in Harold's seat. Third in, right side, last pew. He sat still, legs swinging slightly above the floor, hands folded like he'd seen grown-ups do. For a moment, he imagined what it was like to sit here year after year, to hear the same prayers, to watch the same people grow older. He turned to the seat next to him. It felt warm, even though no one had been there. Not physically warm, but warm in that strange, heart-deep way. Like someone had just whispered something without using words. He didn't fully understand it, but he didn't need to. When Harold arrived, yes, at exactly 8:27, he paused, saw the boy sitting there, and for the first time in a long while, he hesitated. Then, slowly, he walked down the aisle and sat in the seat next to Liam. Neither of them said anything for several minutes. Then Harold turned and asked, "You ever lose someone?" Liam blinked. "Like, lose how?" Harold shrugged, as if to say, all the ways. Liam thought for a bit. "My cat last year. She ran away, or maybe someone took her. I don't know." Harold nodded. Loss is strange. Sometimes it's sharp, sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it doesn't feel like anything until later. Liam looked up. "Is that what happened with your wife?" Harold didn't flinch. It was all of that, and more. From then on, questions became their language, not in a pressuring way, more like puzzle pieces slowly falling into place. One week, Liam asked, "What's the first thing you noticed about her?" Harold smiled without opening his eyes. her voice. It was like wind through tall grass, soft but sure. Another week, Liam asked, "Were you scared when she got sick?" And Harold nodded, terrified. Later still, "Did you ever want to leave?" "No," Harold said, "but I wanted the pain to leave me." The questions weren't always heavy. Sometimes they were silly. "Did you ever eat an entire cake by yourself?" Harold's face broke into the biggest grin Liam had seen. "On our 5th anniversary. Chocolate, no regrets." Or, "Did she ever fart in her sleep?" Harold tried to look serious, failed, laughed. Once, just once, but loud enough that I pretended it was thunder, and Liam laughed so hard he snorted. Their conversations didn't happen every week. Sometimes they sat in silence, and that was okay. Sometimes Harold didn't come, and Liam understood. And sometimes Liam had questions he didn't ask. Not yet, because he was learning that some questions need time. One Sunday, after service, Liam and Harold walked around the back of the church. It was quiet. The rain had just ended, and the grass smelled new. Liam asked, "Does she believe in heaven?" Harold looked up at the sky. "I think she believed in something bigger. Maybe not pearly gates and clouds, but something where love doesn't just disappear." "Do you?" Harold didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I believe in the promises we keep. And if love is a promise, then yes." Liam nodded. He didn't understand all of it, but he felt it. And sometimes feeling is deeper than knowing. One evening, weeks later, Liam sat at the kitchen table working on a school project. It was about family traditions. He asked his grandmother, "Is going to church a tradition?" She looked at him, puzzled. "I suppose." "Why?" "I think I want to write about Mr. Harold." She raised her eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I think sitting with him is like a tradition now. He's kind of like family, but different." She nodded slowly. "That sounds just right." That night, Liam wrote, "Some people think family is who you eat dinner with or who you go on vacation with. But I think sometimes family is just the person who sits beside you quietly and listens to your questions without trying to fix you." He handed it in the next day. His teacher gave him an A, but more importantly, she asked for a copy. The rain had been falling quietly for hours, turning the small-town streets into shimmering ribbons of silver. It was one of those slow, steady rains that made the world feel softer, quieter somehow. Perfect for memories. Harold sat by the window of his small, worn-down house, not far from the church. Outside, droplets traced lazy paths down the glass, blurring the world beyond. He wrapped his hands around a chipped ceramic mug, the warmth seeping into his fingers. But it wasn't quite enough to chase the chill that had settled deep inside him. It was on evenings like this, long, gray, and still, that the past came creeping back, folding over him like a heavy blanket. He thought about the years before the rain, before the quiet Sundays at the church, before Liam. Harold's mind drifted back to a younger version of himself, walking down the same streets, but with lighter steps and a heart full of hope. They remembered the first time they met Ellen, her laugh like sunshine, her hair catching fire in the late afternoon light. They were young, reckless, and madly in love. They dreamed of a life that stretched endlessly ahead, full of promises and plans. For years, they built that life together. Their home was filled with music, the smell of fresh bread and the soft, steady hum of love. But life, Harold had learned, could change like the weather. Sometimes the skies darkened without warning, and the storms came fast. Ellen got sick. At first it was small things, a cough that lingered too long, a tiredness that wouldn't go away. Then the doctors gave them names that sounded foreign and frightening. Harold sat beside her through endless nights, holding her hand as the illness stole away the brightness from her eyes. He remembered one rainy night, much like this one, when Ellen whispered to him, "Promise me you'll keep sitting in our pew, even when I'm gone." He promised. Those years before the rain shaped everything Harold was now. The years of waiting, watching, and learning how to carry grief without breaking. He understood what it meant to love someone so much that even their absence could feel like a presence. Harold took a slow breath and looked at the chair beside him. Empty as it had been every Sunday at church, it was still warm with memories, still holding the shape of someone he never stopped loving. Across town, Liam sat at his own window, watching the rain fall. He thought about Harold's stories, the quiet strength behind the man's soft words and pauses, the way Harold's eyes seemed to hold whole lifetimes. Liam wondered what the years before the rain were like for Harold. What pain, what joy, what quiet moments shaped the man who sat every Sunday in that last pew. And Liam knew, in some way, even if he didn't understand it fully yet, that grief wasn't just sadness. It was love stretched thin across time. The rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean, whispering the soft secrets of healing to anyone who would listen.
Snow doesn't cover everything, it reveals what matters. The snow had come early that year. It wasn't just a light dusting, the kind that lingers on the rooftops and then melts before noon. No, this was real snow. Heavy, full-bodied, honest snow. It piled on windowsills like waiting hands and stretched across fields like a fresh page. The old trees in town stood still under the weight of it, silent, as if remembering something important. And in the middle of it all was the church, still and waiting, with the same empty pew, but not entirely empty. That Sunday morning, Liam stood by the large oak doors, watching flakes drift from the sky like they were letters from heaven. He had come early, earlier than usual. His cheeks were red from the cold, his breath puffed in soft clouds, and his eyes, those big, searching eyes, looked toward the last pew. And Harold was there. Same coat, same hat, same soft nod. Liam tiptoed down the aisle, careful not to let his boots squeak on the polished wood. He slid into the pew right next to Harold, who offered him a warm smile. "You beat me here today," Harold said, voice like an old radio, low and kind. "I wanted to ask you something," Liam said, pulling off his gloves. "Well then, you're in the right place," Harold said. Liam didn't speak right away. He looked around the church, the old wooden beams, the high stained glass windows, the flickering candles by the altar. Then he said, "Do you think snow is like a promise?" Harold's brow raised. "That's a curious way to put it. What do you mean?" Liam bit his lip. Like, snow covers everything, even the ugly parts. The broken sidewalks, the dead grass, even the trash behind the grocery store. It makes things quiet, beautiful. Harold leaned back. I like that. Snow as a promise. He looked up at the rafters like the answer might be carved into them. Maybe it's God's way of saying, I'm still here. I still make things new. Liam nodded slowly, unsure if he understood it all, but liking the sound of it. Then, almost in a whisper, he asked, Did she like snow? Harold didn't ask who she was. He knew. His fingers twitched slightly, then settled. She did, Harold said. She used to say snow was proof that God could still surprise us. Liam looked at Harold closely. Do you still talk to her? Harold gave a small smile. Every morning. There are things children understand better than adults. Not because they're smarter, but because they haven't yet built all the fences we build around our hearts. Liam, without knowing the term, understood grief. Not in the way a therapist would explain it, but in the way only someone who had waited at a hospital door or stood too long in silence could feel it. Harold never said her name out loud. He didn't need to. And Liam never asked. He didn't need to either. That morning, as the church began to fill, the two of them sat in that last pew, watching the snow fall outside the high windows. The world outside was cold and loud and busy. But in here, for a moment, time had curled up and gone to sleep. The sermon that day was about faith. Not the kind that stands on stages or wears expensive shoes, but the kind that sits quietly next to a boy who asks hard questions. The kind that leaves a seat open year after year, just in case someone needs it. Harold didn't cry, but Liam thought maybe his eyes held a bit more shine than usual. After the service, people filed out with red noses and covered heads, laughing about how slippery the parking lot was. Kids threw snowballs behind the church sign. One even hit the pastor's car. Liam stayed behind. He stood by the window, watching the snow. Harold walked up behind him. She was the first one to sit in that pew, he said quietly, when this place opened 40 years ago. She said she liked being close to the door, said it made her feel like she was welcoming everyone who came in. So now you sit there for her? Harold smiled. No, I sit there with her. That was the first time Liam saw it, not just the sorrow in Harold's eyes, but the warmth underneath, like coals under ashes. It wasn't that Harold had forgotten or let go, it was that he had made peace with remembering. That week, school closed for 2 days because of the snowstorm. Liam spent the time writing in his notebook, little stories, thoughts, doodles of Harold's hat and the tall windows in church. One page had just one sentence, scribbled and underlined. Some things don't melt. He asked his mom what that meant, and she just smiled. On Thursday, he walked to the church, crunching through the thick snow. He found Harold shoveling the front steps. You shouldn't be doing that, Liam called. Harold leaned on the shovel. You're saying I'm old. Liam grinned. No, I'm saying you don't want me to slip and break your promise. Harold tilted his head. What promise? He pointed toward the door. To be there, every Sunday, last pew. Harold looked at the door, looked at the snow, then looked at Liam. I don't remember making that promise, he said. Liam shrugged. You didn't, but you keep it anyway. Later that evening, Harold opened an old shoebox in his living room. Inside were letters, some yellowed, some still crisp, notes, Photos, programs from services long past. One of them was a photo of the pew, empty except for a hat and scarf. He stared at that photo for a long time. Then he took out a pen, and on the back he wrote, February 12th, first snow Liam saw from the pew. He placed it gently back in the box and closed the lid. In the silence of his small home, Harold whispered a name, just once, then turned off the light. Sunday came again. More snow, more people. And again, Liam and Harold sat in the last pew. This time, Liam brought something, a small wooden snowflake he carved in shop class. He handed it to Harold. "It's not perfect," he said. Harold turned it over in his hands. "Neither is snow. That's why it's beautiful." Liam smiled, then looked at the pew ahead of them. "Do you think she sees us?" Harold didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed the snowflake on the seat between them. "I think she never left." And neither of them moved it the rest of the service.
People said Harold stopped coming to church the year the steeple cracked. That wasn't true. The crack came later. What came first was a Sunday when Harold's usual pew, third from the back, far right, close to the stained glass of the Good Shepherd, sat empty. It startled people more than they expected. Maybe because they'd never seen that seat empty before. Not even once. Not in snowstorms, not in blackouts, not even the Sunday after his wife died. It was just his seat. When someone like Harold is gone, the absence has a shape. It's like someone left a coat hanging there, invisible, still warm. For over 30 years, he'd come early enough to beat the choir. Always carried the same worn Bible, the cover soft like suede from decades of holding. His jacket, brown corduroy in the fall, olive green in the winter, always the same pattern, like the seasons knew him, would rest beside him. One seat, always left empty. That was where she sat, Marjorie. Some folks thought it strange Harold saving the space for someone long gone, but not those who knew Harold. That seat was never empty to him, not once. It took 3 Sundays before someone sat in it. A visitor, a young man new to town, unknown. He slid into the pew with a polite nod, completely unaware that half the congregation held their breath. The next day, Harold came back, quiet, as usual, sat 2 pews up, didn't look back. The young man never returned. From then on, no one touched the seat. It was Liam who noticed it first, how Harold kept glancing toward the pew, his eyes not bitter, not sad either, just tracking, like a man watching something move only he could see. Liam didn't ask. He was old enough now to understand that some stories speak louder when left alone. But on one Tuesday afternoon, Harold sat next to Liam on the old bench outside the bakery. No greeting, just sat. Pulled half a muffin from a bag in his coat pocket, handed it to Liam. "Apple cinnamon," he said. "Marjorie's favorite." Liam took it, waited. The silence between them was never awkward. Harold didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. "She used to bring 2, Harold said. "One for me, one for anyone sitting alone." He didn't cry, didn't shift, just stared across the street like he was looking for her among the shadows. "That seat," Harold said, "I left it for her. But really, I left it for anyone needing to feel less alone." Liam nodded, but Harold wasn't finished. She believed church wasn't about the sermon or the songs. It was about the empty seats. Who fills them? Who needs them? Who watches to make sure no one slips in and out unseen? Harold's voice softened. "People think the seat's empty because she's gone. They're wrong. It's never been empty." He stood slowly, joints creaking in the cold. One day he said, "You'll see what I mean." After Harold passed, nobody talked about the pew at first. The ushers avoided it. The cleaner never dusted it. It just remained untouched. Liam sat behind it every Sunday, like he'd done since he was a boy. And every week he noticed something new. A flower left gently on the cushion, a handwritten note tucked under the hymnal, once a drawing from a child. The seat became a quiet kind of magnet for grief, for prayers, for those without anyone to talk to. By Easter, something had changed. Mrs. Dalrymple, whose husband had died that January, sat there one Sunday, trembling like a leaf in the breeze. She didn't ask permission, just sat, her hands folded so tight they turned white. After service, she didn't say a word, but she left a peppermint on the pew. The next Sunday, someone else sat there, a young woman with eyes red from crying. She never came back, but she left a folded bulletin with a name scribbled across it. "Thank you, I needed this." Liam began to understand. Harold wasn't holding the seat for Marjorie. He was holding it for anyone who needed to believe that someone remembered them, that someone saw them. He remembered the time his own mother sat there, the week she almost gave up after losing her job. She told him later she hadn't even known why she chose that pew. I just felt like someone was waiting for me. Sometimes people don't need answers. They need presence. That's what the pew became. A presence. Not a memorial, not a shrine. Just a quiet whisper that you weren't alone. Years passed. Liam grew into the same corduroy jackets Harold once wore. He didn't realize he was doing it. People noticed, though, called him Little Harold behind his back, even though he was nearly 6 feet tall, and nothing like Harold in temper. But in soul, maybe they were closer than anyone knew. On one stormy Sunday, lightning knocked out the power, the sanctuary lit only by flickering candles. That morning, a stranger arrived, elderly, with a cane and eyes full of lost time. No one recognized him. He wandered to the third pew from the back, far right, and sat. Someone behind Liam whispered. He took the seat. Liam turned around, watched, but he didn't move. After service, Liam approached him gently. "You're welcome to sit there any time," he said. The man smiled. "My wife used to say that pew was magic." Liam smiled back. She wasn't wrong. That night, Liam wrote a small note and tucked it into the hymnal of the pew. It read, "This seat isn't empty. It's saved. Saved for the tired, the grieving, the wondering, the returning. For those who need to remember what love feels like." The next week, someone left another note, then another. Over the months, the pew became a quiet kind of mailbox for hope, for grief, for memories. And Liam, he stopped sitting behind it. He sat in it. One day, someone would call it his seat, but not yet. Not while the echo of Harold's devotion still hummed through the wood grain. Even after all this time, the seat had never truly been empty. Not once. It had been 19 years. Liam Harper stood behind the pulpit of the old country church, its white paint now a touch brighter, the floorboards less creaky than he remembered, but the heart of it unchanged. Outside, the tall oaks whispered in the summer wind, just like they did when he was 8 years old, sitting in the second pew beside Harold Fisher's empty seat. Today, that seat wasn't empty. It had been reupholstered years ago, like the rest of the sanctuary, but Liam had asked the craftsman to leave one detail untouched: the small scuff mark along the front left leg, where Harold used to tap his worn dress shoes every Sunday. It was barely visible now, just a notch in time. But Liam knew it was there, a relic of rhythm, a heartbeat etched in wood. The congregation was larger these days, young families, old-timers, even a few college kids who'd wandered in by mistake and stayed. On the front row sat his wife, Anna,
and their two boys, Samuel and little Harold. Yes, Harold. Liam smiled gently at the sight of them, then turned back to his notes. But today he wouldn't need them. The sermon had already been lived. "I want to tell you a story," he began, his voice steady, quiet, carrying across the old sanctuary like a familiar song. Not from scripture today, but from this very room. People leaned forward. They knew this tone. It meant something was coming, not fire and brimstone, but something deeper, something remembered. There used to be a man who sat right over there, second pew from the front, on the aisle. He wore the same brown coat every Sunday, even in the summer. He brought the same old Bible, and he never said much of anything. I don't remember his voice, not really. I remember the sound of his breathing. I remember the way his hand would grip the pew when the music swelled. I remember thinking he looked a little sad and a little tired. Liam paused. I was 8 years old when I asked him if he was lonely. There were soft chuckles from the older crowd, some of whom had heard this before, but not like this, not from the pulpit, not with Liam wearing the collar and not the Sunday school badge. He didn't expect him to answer. He didn't. He just smiled at me, the kind of smile that hurts a little, you know. But he came back the next week and the next, always in that same spot, always alone. And then one week, he didn't. The hush that fell over the sanctuary was absolute. The stained glass caught the morning sun just right, casting soft yellows and greens across Leo's shoulders like a stole of memory. I don't know what happened to him. No next of kin, no obituary, just gone. A brown coat on a hook in the foyer, a chair that didn't creak the next Sunday. And I remember, I cried. I didn't know why I cried so hard. I didn't even know his first name. There it was. The thread pulled gently back through time. A boy and a man and a question that had never been answered until now. But I know now. His name was Harold Fisher. He worked at the lumber yard. He fought in the war. He lost his wife to cancer when he was just 38, and he never quite came back from that. He looked out over the congregation, his voice thickening. I know now that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones holding up the whole room, not by words, not even by deeds, just by showing up, just by being faithful. He took a breath. I also know that for years, he never prayed aloud, not once, not during altar calls, not in Bible studies, not even over potlucks. Light laughter rippled. But one day, when I was much older, I found something. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, time-worn leather journal. Its edges were frayed, its pages crinkled from age and perhaps tears. It wasn't a diary, it was a prayer. One long, unending prayer, spanning pages, years, a prayer he never spoke out loud. He opened the book, his fingers careful, reverent. Lord, I do not know what I bring to you. I do not sing well. I do not preach. I do not feel joy like others do. I feel broken. But I come. I come because I do not know where else to go. I come because this place is the last thing that makes sense. I sit in that pew and hope that maybe someday someone will notice I was here, not for my sake, but because I need to know I wasn't invisible to you. The room was still. Someone sniffled. Someone else wept. Liam closed the book. I don't know what happened to Harold in those last weeks. I don't know if he ever felt seen, but I do know this. He was not invisible. Not to me, not to God, and not to the legacy he left behind. He nodded toward the children's choir, where a young boy with sandy hair and a crooked tie grinned up at him. Harold Jr. I named my son after him. Not just because he was kind, but because he taught me something I never forgot. Faith is not loud. It's not eloquent. It's not even always hopeful. Sometimes it's just presence, just sitting in the seat, just breathing through the pain, just showing up. Liam stepped down from the pulpit, and that is a sermon worth preaching. The organ hummed gently to life, a simple hymn, "Come thou fount of every blessing." The same one Harold used to hum so softly no one ever noticed, but Liam had. And now the whole church sang it. Not out of obligation, but out of remembrance. After the service, Liam knelt beside the old pew, the one with the scuff mark, and rested the journal in its place. Not buried, not forgotten, just waiting for the next quiet soul who needed to know that showing up was enough. That faith, even silent, is never unseen. That the prayer he never said was heard all along. If this story stirred your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We share stories like this every week to keep faith alive in every season of life. God bless you.